There is a particular kind of courage that the world rarely applauds. Not the courage of the battlefield, not the courage of the courtroom, but the quiet, grinding courage of a man who looks at everything he has built, the fame, the fortune, the adoration of millions, and chooses to walk away from it all in search of something real. That is the story of Richard Gere. And if you think you know it, think again. Because the version the tabloids told you, the one about the fading movie star and the Hollywood exile, is only the surface of something far deeper, far more human, and far more moving than anything he ever performed on screen. At 76 years old, Richard Gere is not the man the world expected him to become. He is not chasing roles. He is not fighting to stay relevant. He is not posting carefully curated photographs to remind you that he still exists. Instead, he is living in Madrid, Spain, raising young children with his wife Alejandra Silva, waking up in the mornings not to a film set, but to the sound of his boys calling for their father. The man who was once named the sexiest man alive, the man who made the world's heart race an American gigolo and an officer and a gentleman, has traded the red carpet for something infinitely more meaningful, the ordinary, sacred rhythm of family life. And if that does not move you, then you have not yet understood what he gave up to get there. To understand where Richard Gere is today, you have to go back to where he started. He was born in Philadelphia in 1949, but it was in Syracuse, New York, a small town of barely 5,000 people, where he was shaped into the man he would become. From the very beginning, there was something different about him. While other boys were content with the simple certainties of small-town life, young Richard was restless in a way that no school curriculum or social expectation could contain. He played piano, guitar, and trumpet. He excelled at gymnastics. He read philosophy, not because a teacher assigned it, but because he genuinely needed to understand what existence meant. He was the kind of boy who carries the weight of big questions in a world that prefers small answers. His father, Homer Gere, was an insurance agent known for his ethical standards and his deep Methodist faith. His mother created a home filled with warmth, music, and encouragement. They gave him the tools he needed, but they could not give him the answers he was looking for. A gymnastics scholarship took him to the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where he studied philosophy and carried Jean-Paul Sartre's Being and Nothingness under his arm like a quiet declaration of intent. But even academia felt like a cage. Within 2 years, he left. He moved to New York City in 1969, broke and burning with purpose, taking minor theater roles and living out of his car. He was not running from something. He was running towards something he could not yet name. The name would come to him not in New York, not on any stage, but in Nepal. A trip that began as artistic exploration turned into a spiritual awakening when Gere encountered Tibetan Buddhist monks and, eventually, the Dalai Lama himself. Something shifted inside him permanently during that encounter. Buddhism was not a trend for Richard Gere, not a Hollywood accessory to be worn at parties and discarded when inconvenient. It became the architecture of his entire inner life. He began practicing Zen meditation under Kyozen Joshu Sasaki, spending months in silence, learning to quiet the restlessness that had defined his youth. He was not becoming someone new. He was finally becoming himself. And then Hollywood found him. Or perhaps he found Hollywood. And everything accelerated beyond imagination. His role in Looking for Mr. Goodbar in 1977 caught the industry's attention. Terrence Malick's Days of Heaven in 1978 showcased the kind of nuanced, textured talent that serious directors dream about. But it was American Gigolo in 1980 that broke the world open. Playing Julian Kay, a man whose sole desire for a living, Gere became something he had never asked to be. A global sex symbol. His face was on every magazine. His name was on every lip. Women adored him. Men wanted to be him. And somewhere beneath all of that blazing attention, the Buddhist practitioner who meditated every morning watched it all with a kind of bemused detachment that only made him more fascinating. An officer and a gentleman made it official. The film grossed nearly $130 million. It earned 2 Academy Awards. Gere's portrayal of Zach Mayo, a damaged young man clawing his way toward redemption and dignity, was the kind of performance that stays with audiences for decades. He was nominated for a Golden Globe. The studios wanted more of him. The public wanted more of him. And for a brief, shimmering moment, it seemed like Richard Gere had everything a person could possibly want from this life. But here's what the world did not know, or perhaps chose not to notice. While the cameras flashed and the box office numbers climbed, Gere was deepening his commitment to something the entertainment industry had absolutely no interest in: justice for Tibet. His relationship with the Dalai Lama had grown into one of the most profound friendships of his life, and the situation facing Tibetan people under Chinese government control was not something he could look away from. Not when he had sat with those monks. Not when he had felt, in the silence of meditation, the weight of human suffering. Not when a man he deeply respected had asked for his help. In 1987, Gere began his public campaign against Chinese human rights abuses in Tibet. Hollywood's reaction was swift and merciless. Studios that had happily written him enormous checks suddenly found reasons not to return his calls. Projects evaporated without explanation. The machinery of an industry that had billions of dollars invested in the Chinese film market quietly, but definitively closed its doors to him. And then came 1993, the moment that sealed his fate in Hollywood's eyes. Standing at the Academy Awards podium as a presenter, Gere used the platform not to read nominations, but to speak out directly about China's treatment of Tibet. The room went cold. The industry went cold. The Academy permanently banned him from future Oscar presentations. The Chinese government imposed a complete ban on his films and prohibited him from entering the country. In one act of conscience, he had walked away from the most lucrative film market on earth. Some people called him reckless. Some called him naive. Some whispered that he had thrown away his career for a lost cause. But Gere never flinched, never apologized. He said plainly that if he had to make the same choice again, he would make it again without hesitation. There is a word for that kind of moral consistency. It is not stubbornness. It is not pride. It is integrity, the rarest and most expensive commodity in Hollywood. His personal life, during these years, carried its own quiet storms. His marriage to supermodel Cindy Crawford, which began with a Las Vegas elopement and aluminum foil rings and dinner at Denny's in December 1991, captured the world's imagination. They were beautiful together, spiritual together, seemingly perfect together. But beauty is not always enough to bridge the distances that grow between two people who are each reaching for different versions of their own lives. By the end of 1994, they had separated. Cindy later spoke with honesty about the relationship, acknowledging the difficulty of finding equal footing with a man who had such an intensely defined interior world. The marriage ended, but Gere carried the lessons from it forward. Years passed. Roles in independent films kept his artistic voice alive even as mainstream Hollywood turned its back on him. He made films that mattered to him, complex, flawed, human stories, rather than films designed to generate sequels and merchandise. His 2012 performance in Arbitrage proved that his talent had not merely survived the exile, but deepened within it. Critics who had once dismissed him as a pretty face were forced to reckon with an actor who had grown into something quietly extraordinary. And then, at 50 years old, he became a father for the first time. His son Homer, born to actress Carrie Lowell, changed him in a way that no film role and no spiritual retreat ever had. He spoke about holding his child as a revelation, a moment of love so uncomplicated and so absolute that it reordered everything he thought he understood about what mattered. The man who had spent decades searching for peace in philosophy and meditation finally found something that simply gave it to him, freely, every single morning. Fatherhood did not answer his big questions. It made them feel, suddenly and beautifully, less urgent. His marriage to Carrie Lowell eventually ended. The pressures of his commitments to activism and spiritual practice, creating distances that proved too wide to cross. It was a painful chapter, and Gere has never minimized the difficulty of it. But even through that loss, he continued to show up as a father, present, devoted, determined that whatever else life took from him, it would not take that. Then came Alejandra Silva, a Spanish activist and publicist nearly 34 years his junior. Alejandra was not impressed by his fame. She was drawn to his values, his commitment, his genuine desire to make the world more just and more kind. Their relationship developed with a quiet authenticity that stood in sharp contrast to the media circuses of his earlier romantic life. They married in 2018. Together, they have two sons, Alexander and James, born when Gere was in his late 60s and then at 70. He also helped raise Alejandra's son Albert from a previous relationship. Their home is bilingual, their values are shared, and their life is, by every account from those who know them, genuinely happy. Think about what it means to become a father at 70. To wake up in the morning knowing that small people depend on you not for your name, or your net worth, or your place in cinematic history, but simply for your presence, for your voice at breakfast, for your hand to hold when the world feels confusing. Richard Gere, the man who once defined cinematic desire, now defines himself by the unglamorous, irreplaceable work of being there, of showing up, of being the father his children will one day remember not as a Hollywood legend, but as the man who was simply, consistently, lovingly there. The move to Madrid in 2024 was, in its way, the most revealing choice of his entire life. Not New York, not Los Angeles, not the centers of power and visibility that have defined his adult existence, but Madrid, a city where he can walk his children to school without a photographer hiding behind every lamppost. A city where he is, more than anywhere else on earth, just a man, just a husband, just a father. The silver-haired man moving through Spanish streets with two small boys beside him is the furthest possible image from the American gigolo who set the world on fire more than 4 decades ago. And yet, looking at him now, it is impossible not to feel that this is who he was always meant to be. At 73, pneumonia placed him in the hospital and brought him face to face with his own mortality in the starkest possible terms. He lay there not thinking about his filmography or his activism record or the battles he had won and lost with Hollywood. He thought about his boys. He thought about whether he would live long enough to see them grow into men. That fear, the most human fear there is, stripped away every remaining layer of celebrity and revealed the core of him, a father who needed more time. He recovered, but those close to him say he came back changed, more deliberate, more careful, more conscious of the preciousness of ordinary days. He began writing letters to his sons, recording stories, documenting the family traditions he wanted them to carry forward even when he was gone, not because he was preparing to give up, but because he understood, finally and completely, that the most important legacy a person can leave is not a filmography or a foundation or a political victory. It is the values written into the hearts of the people you love. At 76, Richard Gere is proof of something the world needs desperately to remember. That a life well lived is not measured in box office receipts or awards or the number of times your face appeared on a magazine cover. It is measured in the choices you made, when the right choice was also the costly one. It is measured in the relationships you fought to protect and the principles you refused to abandon. It is measured in the small, private moments, the morning meditations, the bedtime stories, the walks through a city that does not know your name, that no camera ever captures and no journalist ever writes about. He walked away from fame when fame was still fully available to him. He spoke truth when silence would have made him rich. He became a father when most men his age are becoming grandfathers. He moved to a foreign country so his children could grow up in peace. And through all of it, the exile, the heartbreak, the health scares, the professional betrayals and personal losses, he never once pretended to be someone other than who he was. That is the story of Richard Gere at 76. Not a story of decline, not a story of regret, a story of a man who chose, again and again, the harder and more honest life, and found, at the end of all that choosing, something the world's most coveted red carpets could never have given him. He found himself. He found peace. And he found it, of all places, in the ordinary miracle of being a father who shows up every single day. Some people leave the world a monument. Richard Gere is leaving it something better. The quiet, enduring example of a life lived with courage, compassion, and love.